So if you found yourself on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com in the past 3 to 6 months, then this video is probably for you. We're going to talk today about the process of home buying. And I'm here with Cece. So the first step is normally when people are looking online, right? We were just talking about that. They're going onto these websites, looking at houses online. What would you say after this, window shopping online? What do you think the next steps is?
I definitely think your next step should be contacting a local realtor that you know, that you've been referred to or you've seen around that can help you and guide you on what to do next. Mm-hmm. Whether that's getting pre-approved and talking to someone like yourself, mm-hmm. or that's actually getting in there and looking at houses and figuring out exactly what it is that you want.
Right. Getting in touch with a real estate professional, whether it be a real estate agent or mortgage loan officer, is typically going to be your first step. From there, their guidance is going to be huge for you. Mm-hmm. As a real estate agent, you have tons of people coming to you, asking you about buying homes and things like that. So they're probably inquiring about certain properties. Mm-hmm. What is your first thing you normally do? You normally go and show them their property right away, or?
So normally I try to get a feel of where you are in the home buying process. You could be very far out, like a few years out, and maybe wanting to start planning out that journey. And that's when I would refer them to you. Mm-hmm. And then we could start developing a plan on them getting their financing all set up and maybe figuring out what they could possibly be pre-approved for in the future, so we can narrow down that search.
Okay.
Or they already have a lender and they're already ready to go, and then we just go and schedule showings right off the bat and we can go see houses. If I have a buyer who's looking to get pre-approved, what is that next step? How would you go about contacting them and getting them pre-approved?
Yeah, great question. So a pre-approval, basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna do what's called an application. So I need to speak with them. Either, I can communicate any way they want, over the phone, text, email. We even have a link we could send them where they can fill out an online application. Basically, we're just gonna go through, look at their finances, how much money they make, how long have they been at their job, how much money they have to put down, how much do they have in assets, their whole credit profile. And from there, we can kind of choose the best loan program for them, all right? We can talk about what to expect for monthly payments, because that's obviously huge, right? Before you start shopping for a house, especially right now with where rates are, you want to know what you're going to be spending monthly, right?
Exactly.
You're also going to want to know what out-of-pocket expenses that you're going to have, right?
How much you need to bring to the closing table.
Right. So how much money you need for a down payment. Talk about closing costs, how much you need to pay in closing costs, because a lot of people don't realize that. Along with the down payment, there's also closing costs. So what we try to do is we try to educate everybody up front as much as we can about the loan process and about what options are available to them. And then from there, hopefully the end result is that they are pre-approved, and that is their green light to start shopping for a house.
And say they aren't pre-approved off that first conversation, are there steps that you can help them to get pre-approved in the near future?
Yeah. So like I said, we're going to analyze everything, everywhere from where their income is now, where it might be in the future, where their credit is now, where their assets are now, right? So we'll let them know what programs are available to them and what they need to do to get there. Once we've pre-approved the buyer, now it's time for us to send the buyer back to Cece.
So what we would do initially is what's called a buyer's consultation, and I would sit down with the buyer and figure out exactly what it is that they want and what they need in a house. And we did do a little video before that touched on that and talked all about home searching and what the criteria are that we can put in an MLS search for the buyers specifically. So if you want to watch that, we can leave that in the bio below. Perfect. And then from there, we'll actually start scheduling showings. So we could see one showing one day, or we could see 15 houses in one day. It really depends on what's available in your price range and what meets your criteria and what doesn't. We'll look at everything. We'll look at all the heating systems, cooling systems. We'll open cabinets and drawers. We will just take our time and really look at the homes, because this is a big decision. Right. You want to be confident on what you're looking at.
Yeah. Okay. And then you find a home you like.
So if you find a home you like, that's when we put in an offer. So typically I like to go back to you, the lender, and let you know, hey, we're putting in an offer on a house. Yep. Can you write a pre-approval for this specific amount that we're going to put it on? And then we will sit down, we'll talk about numbers, we'll talk about if we need closing cost assistance or deposit amount for earnest money deposits.
Yep.
We'll talk about inspections, and we'll talk about closing timeline.
You find a house you like. Next step is now to make an offer on the house, and that's a document that you draw up with them.
It's called a purchase and sales agreement, and we will sit down, we'll write all of it in depth.
Yep.
From
purchase
price, purchase, deposit amounts, from closing dates to any contingencies, like if you are selling another home and it needs to be contingent on that, or if we're doing inspections and it's contingent on that, or even an appraisal and it's contingent on the house appraising. We will outline that all in the purchase and sales agreement, and then we will sign it and send it off to the seller and have them review it and hopefully accept it. So, Seth, when do you come in to help buyers in both Mass and Rhode Island? Because I know they're a little bit different in each state.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely different in both states. So Massachusetts is an attorney state, Rhode Island is not. So in Massachusetts, typically an attorney is the one that's drafting that purchase and sale for you. So in Massachusetts, once you submit an offer and it's accepted, it tends to go to inspection, and after that, it comes to us to draft the purchase and sale. From that point, we reach out to the borrowers and make sure that everything looks good to them on the purchase and sale. And if everything looks good, we submit that to the seller side. Everybody signs, and then at that point, it's a contract. And now in Rhode Island, it's typically a cookie cutter form. So a lot of the time the realtors will draft those purchase and sales because it's a little bit easier and the attorneys don't have to play as big of a role. But at that point, once you have that purchase and sale drafted, you send that over to the attorneys. We would go ahead and review that with the borrower, make sure everything looks perfect. If everything looks good to them, they go ahead and sign. The sellers will sign, and then you guys start working on your end. The lender starts working, and we start working on the title.
What is your next step after you have a signed purchase and sales from your clients?
Yeah, so after the purchase and sales are signed, that is now considered a title order, and we start working on it. And by that, it means that we submit our search to our underwriter, who is going to go ahead and do the search. That usually takes anywhere from a couple hours to 24 hours, and then it's sent back to us. Once we have that, our attorneys, one of our 4 attorneys, is going to take that, and they're going to review it and clear it, basically. So if there's any defects or anything that's on there that shouldn't be, they're working with the paralegals to track down those discharges or liens and clear them so that we have a clear marketable title. And what that means is that the only things that are on there are the things that should be on there. The mortgages that should be paid off, and really just who is currently holding title. If all of those look clean, you have a clean title.
So after a clean title, you come in next at closing day. Can you kind of walk through what a closing day looks like and what you might need to bring as a buyer? Yeah,
so there's a little bit more before we get to the closing part of it, but what we'd end up doing is, we're staying in touch with the seller side. We're making sure that all the realtors are all on the same page and everybody knows that we're all going towards the same closing contract date. Then we receive a clear to close from the lender. Once we receive that, we reach out to all parties and say, hey, we have a clear to close from the lender. We'd like to set this to close on this and this day at this time in this location. And once we have that, we get the closing documents from the lender a couple days usually before the closing. We make sure that everything is good. We review it with the borrower, go over the final numbers with the borrower, and then on the closing day, they typically will do the walkthrough in the morning, and then they'll show up at either our office, the realtor's office, the home, wherever it's convenient for everybody to close, and our attorneys will have all the borrowers and the sellers sign the contracts.
And as a buyer, do you need to bring anything to the closing table, like any documents?
Yeah, so any closing you have, whether it's a refi or purchase, you're always going to want to bring a form of identification. Going to want to make sure that you're signing all the documentation properly. We have the attorney there to make sure that everything is done properly, and that's really it. Oh yeah, that's right. And then if there's any money that has to be brought to the table, they have to bring either a cashier's check, or we typically prefer a wire. Wires are the fastest way for the money to come in. And if there's other transactions that piggyback off of that, it's the easiest way for us to get the funds and to send them out to the next transaction.
So now your offer is accepted, and you have 10 days to fully do any and all inspections that you want on a house. So you could do lead inspection, home inspection. If your house has a septic, you could do a septic inspection. You can literally do any inspection at all that you want on the house. And this is your time to really get to know it and know the home that you are about to purchase.
So let's say you do the inspection and there's something on the inspection report that is troublesome. what can you do?
There's two options that you can do in this situation. You can go back to the seller and you can negotiate with them to either have them repair it, pay for it, or partially pay for it so that you're splitting it. Or if it's too much of a cost and it completely deters you from the house, in this 10 days, you can back out of the contract.
Yeah.
So you can completely get all of your deposits back and you will start over. Keep looking again.
So inspection period is now passed. Now it's time to get your mortgage approval finalized.
So how many days do you have to apply for a mortgage after your inspection period?
Well, hopefully you've already applied for a mortgage at that point, but typically, once you get the purchase and sales agreement is typically when a lender is going to start working on your mortgage approval. So that means gathering up all the final documents that we need, recent pay stubs, last 2 years W-2s, bank statements, things like that. We'll also get an appraisal done on the house, which is a little bit different than the inspection. The appraiser's just making sure that the value, you're buying a house for what it's worth, right?
Yeah, you're not overpaying.
You're not overpaying. More importantly, the house is not worth less than what you're paying, right? The condition of the house, the appraiser is going to check some general conditions, but he's not going to be as thorough as a home inspector is going to be. We'll get title work on the house, make sure there's no other liens or judgments against the house. So once we have the approval, once we have the title work in, and once we have the appraisal back in, essentially you're going to be ready to close. Once we have the final mortgage approval, you're going to get what's called the clear to close. And that is essentially the lender's promise to lend you money. And it's something that's needed to satisfy one of the conditions of the contract commitment date.
Yeah, your mortgage commitment date, which is usually like a week before closing.
Yep. So basically you just need to have your mortgage complete by then. And at that time, there's a document that we provide that you could provide the seller's attorney that says, the buyer's good to go. And then, the next step is closing day. Pretty exciting day.
Yeah, very exciting day.
You want to talk a little bit about closing day?
Yeah, so typically closing day, it could either be day of closing or a day before closing. We'll do what's called the final walkthrough, where basically me and you will go to the house. The listing agent will also be there. And we'll just make sure the house is empty of everything that's not supposed to be in there and that wasn't negotiated to stay in the house. So it's going to be typically what's called broom clean. So it's not sparkling clean, but clean enough to where it's empty.
Yep.
And we're going to just make sure everything works. The lights are on, water's still running,
Yep.
Nothing's broken,
Basically, you're buying what you agreed to buy.
Yes,
Yep.
You're buying what you agreed to buy and that it's in good standing condition. It's not a super long process. Probably takes about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we will go over to your attorney's office.
Yeah.
And then you'll sign all the documents.
Yeah, that's an exciting day.
Yeah.
A long road, but
It's usually a very emotional day for a lot of people. And it's a fun day too because you're getting the keys to your new house.
Yeah. Awesome. If you want to learn more about the home buying process, I'm Cameron Stewart, Shamrock Home Loans. I can reach at 401-855-2526.
And I'm Cece Harvey with Century 21 Topsail. You can reach me at 401-481-7117.